right, guys, let's get busy talking about our cluster B personality disorders. And going back to our scaffolding mnemonic, let's start with WWW. The W for this is going to be wild. And wild people also tend to be bold. So that is our part of our ABC mnemonic. That is the B for bold. That puts us within cluster B. So the way I like to think of cluster B is people who are intense, emotional, and dramatic. So these are going to be the really intense, wild, and bold personality disorders. That's how you're going to keep track of these. There's also going to be genetic association with mood disorders and substance abuse. And remember, people with mood disorders tend to be really emotionally labile. So they're way down and depressed, or they're super manic and excited. And people with substance abuse also tend to be really emotionally dysregulated. So that is a way to keep track of our cluster B personality disorders. So, going off of our fictional characters like we were in cluster A, let's talk about antisocial personality disorder first. And our fictional character here is going to be the Joker from Batman. Now, the Joker is extremely famous for being extremely violent, extremely cruel, breaking rules, destroying property, stealing, and he has all of this without any remorse. And this is characteristic of people with antisocial personality disorder. They are repetitively breaking rules, they disregard the rights of others, and they have absolutely no empathy and no remorse for this. And this may be different from people with, let's say, like intermittent explosive disorder, where they get a little bit upset and they punch a wall, but later they feel some remorse. People with antisocial personality disorder do not feel remorse for the horrible things that they do. So they tend to fight, steal, destroy property, lie, breaking promises. All these things are things the Joker might do. Additionally, we need evidence of conduct disorder before age 15. Now, you may remember in our section on developmental disorders, we talked about conduct disorder as being antisocial personality disorder, but when you're below 18 years of age. So you're basically reclassified as soon as you turn 18 years old. And you need to have had evidence of this terrible behavior before age 15. So let's next talk about our borderline personality disorder. And for this, I want to use Anakin Skywalker / Darth Vader from Star Wars as an example. Now, people with borderline personality disorder tend to have histories that are rooted in extreme emotional trauma. An example in Anakin is that he lost two important women in his life. He lost his mother to extreme violence, and he lost his wife, Padme, to childbirth. And in both of these situations, he was largely out of control of these outcomes. And so as a result, he develops borderline personality disorder, which is characterized by extreme emotional lability. So he becomes extremely upset, he gets extremely sad, he gets into fits of rage, he's very violent in terms of how he deals with his emotions, and this is characteristics of someone with borderline personality disorder. Additionally, these people might show emotional emptiness, self-harm, and suicidal ideations, depending on how they are in their emotional state, depending on that level of emotional lability. Additionally, splitting is a defense mechanism that they use. So you may remember our defense mechanism lecture talks about splitting, and the example we used was a patient who one day says, "I love my doctor. My doctor saved my life. Doctors can do no wrong. I support all doctors." Then, 2 days later, when you're on rounds, that same patient is going to say, "I hate doctors. They're just trying to steal my money and give me meds that I don't need. I hate all doctors and nurses, and I want to be out of this hospital." That is an example of someone with splitting. They can only see things in black or white. And the reason why people with borderline personality disorder use splitting is because they have extremely low tolerance for ambiguity. So that kind of brings us into our treatment, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, also called DBT. And this really helps these patients tolerate this ambiguity and tolerate emotional lability. So you can think of DBT as like kindergarten or elementary school for adults. It's teaching a lot of emotional regulation. So they teach mindfulness in order to control feelings of anger or sadness. And they also teach important interpersonal skills. So they teach you how to apologize, how to be a good listener, how to be a good friend. This is all part of dialectical behavioral therapy, which is just a more specific form of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for those with borderline personality disorder. Now, let's move on to histrionic personality disorder. And I'm actually not going to use a fictional character for this one. I'm just going to refer to myself. Now, a fun fact about me is when I'm not studying medicine, I'm actually an amateur drag queen. I've been doing this for almost 10 years now. I perform out at bars and perform at shows, and it's really one of my passions. And I think drag queens and their personas are the ultimate example of a histrionic personality disorder archetype. They tend to be dramatic, flamboyant, and they have attention-seeking behavior. That's part of our job as a drag queen. We have extravagant outfits, we tend to have sexually charged behaviors and performances, and this is characteristic of a patient with histrionic personality disorder. They have surface level flirtatious interactions, they tend to be sexually charged, and oftentimes these patients in vignettes are described as women or women presenting. Additionally, all of these activities tend to be a ploy for attention. These patients really want attention, and they will do that however they can, and that tends to be in how they act, how they dress, how they flirt, how they talk. It's going to be classic for histrionic. Lastly, let's talk about narcissistic personality disorder. And the fictional character we're going to use here is going to be Miranda Priestly from Devil Wears Prada. Now, if you're not familiar, Miranda Priestly is the CEO of a very important fashion company, and she is very demanding. She thinks that her opinion is the best on everything, and she is demanding of her staff and very rude, and she thinks that she is the best. She can do no wrong. If someone criticizes her, she lashes out in anger, and she makes them pay. This is classic of someone with narcissistic personality disorder. So grandiosity, superiority, this leads to an overinflated sense of self. And oftentimes, this is actually rooted in a low self-esteem. So these patients actually have low self-esteem, and they're kind of compensating by this crazy, narcissistic, grandiose behavior. So remember that it's often rooted in low self-esteem. They also have a sense of entitlement in terms of their behaviors. So they demand to be served. They have really poor tolerance of criticism. They will react in rage when you make fun of them or you question them. They also have a limited empathy or concern for the welfare of others. So it's their way or the highway. Now, I want to take a moment to do some differentialing here because we talked about lack of empathy in both antisocial personality disorder and also in narcissistic personality disorder. So I would say that the limited empathy is narcissistic personality disorder. These people are still somewhat human. They have a capacity for empathy, whereas those with antisocial personality disorder, they have no capacity for empathy whatsoever. Additionally, these patients tend to be male in question stems. Now, this is important to differentiate from our borderline personality disorder, which tend to be female in question stem. So that's a great way to differentiate. Additionally, you can think of borderline as emotional lability and intense passion, love, anger, sadness, and characterized by that splitting behavior. That's a great way to separate it from all of our other differentials here. Lastly, let's go over our histrionic personality disorder. This is going to be all about dramatic, flamboyant, attention-seeking behavior. Oftentimes it's sexually charged, and oftentimes these patients are described as female or female presenting as well. So I'm going to highlight that in pink for you guys. So I hope this was a really great scaffold for you guys to learn cluster B personality disorders. Just remember these people are wild and bold, and that will keep you straight on exam day.